live. Thank you for everybody joining us again. We're going to try to squeeze a whole bunch in. So we're just going to get started. Everybody wants to say something, or I'm going to mostly listen. Nick Maybanks is with us again. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
I know it's last minute thing that your schedule works out, so we appreciate you hopping in here.
Not a normal way of spending Monday morning, but I'm cool with it.
So anybody that actually follows this and says, but that one time you said Jason Clark would be on today, we will have him back. He had some training stuff to do, so we'll have him back on. Mike McMill, good morning.
Good morning.
So do something, right? Let's just get right started.
Do something relevant, but what are we going to do, I guess, maybe is really the question.
Yeah. Currently, I think right now there's a couple schools, Linn, a couple schools doing their walkout protest live. So that's their version of do something, and those kids get a right to their voices. But I want them to, first of all, get through school, be good citizens.
Yeah, I think I even said something about that the other day. The best thing they can do is maybe finish high school and become productive members of society and get old enough to vote, and
or sit down in class and write their representatives
or something,
in in cursive. All right.
Does anybody even do? I learned that in the third grade. The only people I see using cursive anymore are like 80-year-old ladies.
Well, most people.
Who writes in cursive anymore? Really?
I sign my name in cursive.
You know, when I was this is our first rabbit hole.
Okay,
so when
it's going to be small.
It is small.
Are we moving on from the high school kids already?
Yeah, no. I'm just saying it's all going to come back.
You come from a family of teachers.
Right, I do.
Hang on for the ride.
And when I was learning Russian and I was learning how to write, and we learned how to write initially in print, right? Their version of print, and which is easier for me. And then the second or third year, I was taking training. The teacher tried to teach us how to do cursive, and I was rebelling because I was like, "This is stupid. Why do I got to learn cursive?" She goes, "Because peasants print." I'm like, "All right then."
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm a peasant.
Yeah. So anyway, kids walking out of Linn today, huh?
Yeah. So first of all, let's get some things out of the way. You work for the county attorney's office. You work for 7 different places. Yes, I own a gun store where we sell things legally. You're a parent.
I am.
You're a parent.
Correct.
We all give a damn, and that's what I get. I get sick of people saying, "Oh well." As you guys well know, this isn't about me. Is the oh, you sell guns, you're part of the problem, blah 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 blah. You just want kids to be injured. We got to move past that because that's ridiculous. And more so, I got to deal with the same emotions everybody else did. If you give a damn, and if you think about it, and if you envision your own kid, which my 17-year-old kid goes to a high school.
Yeah, I mean, you have more of a, I guess, vested interest than I do. My kids are all out of high school.
Understood. So, but yet. I can talk about my own experience saying I teach my kid do this, or this all through their years at Cedar Rapids school system. It was, I don't care what they tell you to do. Here's the things I want you to do in these situations. Like throw your chair through the window and jump out and run away. I don't want you to stay in your room when you're in a first floor room in Arthur. Run away. All that being said, I worry more about my kid every day doing things like him and 5 other kids drive off yesterday to go to this pre-meeting because they have a trip to Guatemala. You know how much it scares me to have 5 teenage kids in car? Because we know how that works.
Right.
The more kids you get in a car, the more likely somebody's like, turn up the music, go faster, do this, do that, get hurt, right? So first things first. But right now, the whole country is talking about mass shootings. And I get why. Even though statistically they're rare, and that's not what's killing most of the children in this country, but how do you not address it? So we'll address it.
Well, let me ask you this, too. I'm a question asker. That's what
I like that.
Statistically, they're rare. I agree with that. But based on current statistics of how many school shootings we've seen in the past year, maybe 2 years, whatever it is, I have a kindergartner.
Yeah.
How many school shootings will occur in America by the time she graduates from high school?
Yeah.
And it depends. It always depends on what classifies as a school shooting. And I know there's some debate over that. But based on what my wife and I just sort of figured on reasonable statistics is, that there's going to be upwards of about 1,400 school shootings by the time she graduates from high school. That might be conservative. That might be, but that's a reasonable range of what's happening. And I'm not talking the ones like Florida that took place, any kind of school shooting. And so as a parent, that's a pretty frightening prospect. When is it going to be our neck of the woods? And a lot of driving this debate, I think, is the fact that it's intense around the areas where these school shootings happen, but for the rest of us, we haven't had to deal with it in our face personally and experience that type of loss. So it's kind of easier to be on the sidelines and be academic about something when other people are actually going through it.
And I agree with that, but I think that also is part of the problem why we're not doing anything, because a lot of things that are really, to me, kind of common sense things, people either won't do because it's logistically difficult and they don't have the will to, because it hasn't happened where they live. I mean, there's big city schools, for instance, I'm just throwing this out there as an example, that have metal detectors and kids go through them, and I've heard the argument that, well, you can't do that because it takes, how long does it take to get 3,000 kids through? Well, it takes a lot less time than cleaning up a mass casualty after they all get shot, right? So, but people won't do that until the risk versus benefit thing goes to one side or the other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like, what are people willing to subject themselves to?
Yeah.
And then when they say we shouldn't have to do this when we can just go do this, this, or this, and that's back where I like people that want to say take away guns or take away this kind of gun. I'm not going to make fun of that. That they see that that's the answer, but the key to what you said is people aren't ready to do what we need to do. Which is
something.
First, do something, right?
Yeah.
Which is make the schools harder to get anything into. You and I both know you still better plan for what do you do in the school. Don't put all the money into saying, hey, we're going to build this place like a fortress, but then we're not going to teach anybody inside to do anything different than they have in the past. You have to say, hey, if you want to go around and teach the government's run, hide, fight, if you want to have, Alice training, there still has to be, I see people saying, well, we need to do this, this, and this, and then this won't happen anymore.
But there's still, we need to make it even, I don't even think, we're not ready for that yet. I mean, I guess that's not maybe the right term, but as long as you have a second grader that thinks it's okay to open the door for anybody.
There you go.
We need to start there. Like you need to start teaching, nobody gets in this building, nobody. And then you build from that, right? You got to start at the basic level. And you do, I mean, no kid will argue with the fire drill that they have to do, or back in my day, the duck and cover for the nuclear bomb. You guys probably aren't older enough for that, but we used to have to do that, right?
Don't age yourself there, right?
I'm okay with it.
I understand. But you're exactly right. How many times do kids let other kids in the thing, into the school? So,
and it's not just kids, but I'm saying everybody's in charge of security. They've got to get that mindset first.
But
it's not somebody else's responsibility.
His soon-to-be second grader someday, you can see the parents saying, "My second grader's there to learn. He's not supposed to have anything to do with security. You're supposed to." But it's a cultural thing, I think, that needs to change.
It's an absolute cultural thing,
and
because
it needs to go backwards from the seniors down right now. Let's make it okay to say, we talked about this. I don't want to tell on Jimmy he's got a joint in his locker, because then you're a snitch. Okay, that's different than, hey, Eric at lunch had a bunch of people and pictures of him shooting them all written down in a kill list. That's not being a snitch anymore. It's like trying to do something to save lives.
How much of that, and you said culture already, how much of that do you think is the result of, the term everybody gets a medal society, right? But how much of that do you think is due to we don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Well,
everybody needs to be included. We've went from the day where, there was obvious prejudice and racism and everything else, which we all can agree was not good. But now I think we've gotten so far on the other way that people are afraid to say anything about anybody that's different. And sometimes, sometimes you need to.
When you say we have a society of everybody gets included, the problem is, when you go back and look at these kids, they weren't always, when I say they weren't always included, they weren't always engaged in part of the show. Just like I read the article from that, as a teacher saying, hey, here's my idea. Did you read the article about the lady that said every Friday or every other Friday I make the kids write down the 4 people they want to sit with?
Outstanding article.
What an easy way to try to figure out who nobody wants to sit with. Now, do you go treat that guy differently right away? No, but you might want to make sure he gets engaged with the other kids.
Well, sorry, but
jump in.
When we talk about, we started with Florida. Obviously, that's the most recent occurrence that it has happened. And a lot of these arguments are good ones. And I think they're part of an overall general conversation we need to have, an approach we need to have that's when I've talked to you, Ernie, I've talked about being holistic. That's
Sure.
what our governor said. We need a holistic approach, okay? But, you know, the kids at Parkland, at the high school there, at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, they did report behavior that was concerning
Yeah.
about Nicholas Cruz. They were very vocal about that.
He's going to go here right away.
They weren't afraid to do that. So I agree that we need to have encourage our young folks to speak up a little bit more and to not have this shield that they are protecting each other on. I don't know if it has anything to do with whether everybody gets an award or whatnot, but that is happening, and so in that sense, I mean, that's just part of the answer, right?
Well, yeah, it's part of the answer, and
That's just part of the answer.
well, I mean, and as Nick said, they did do that there, which is a whole nother topic of discussion we're going to have today about failure of the system at a different level.
Sure.
But I don't think that people, I'm not going to say people in general, feel comfortable calling somebody out anymore. You can't call them what they are because we get in trouble for hurting feelings and singling people out and so on and so on. I mean, I got to go on and on, but
If you think somebody could be a potential mass killer, I would like you to point them out.
people have a problem with that.
Oh, I get
Like
it.
what they did in
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah.
Sure.
Point out.
Yeah.
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 Right.
What'll be interesting to see, and again, is when you say they spoke out, it will be interesting to see which kids, it gets documented which kids spoke out, as in you say that, and you tell me where you read that or saw that, as in what teacher did they go to, what law enforcement did they go to. We've seen the whole thing. You know, I've
Well,
seen
it's been
everywhere
pretty documented. They went to the sheriff's office, and even the
when you say
yeah,
they, though, who?
the people that I don't know their
People
names.
are concerned.
The people that had concerns
Students,
Yeah.
neighbors,
went to
whatever.
the sheriff's office, and they also went to the local Coral Springs, I think it is,
Yeah,
police
Coral
department. So they did, and eventually got to the FBI. So that stuff was reported to the proper
You know,
authorities.
wasn't it like a bail bondsman out of Mississippi or something?
I'm
that-
not sure.
The comment was made about, I'm going to be a professional school shooter.
Yes, the YouTube
Yeah.
video, I think it was in September.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, that's a whole nother failure. When I say I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, I haven't actually watched any of the videos, nor does it matter. Of it went from one officer stayed outside to two officers stayed outside. Now they're saying 3 were behind cars or whatever, and you could call that a failure to act like during the actual event. But there was obviously failures to do something.
And prior to that coming out, the conversation of what now?
Yeah.
Kind of the
Yep.
theme of today was get some armed guards at schools.
Yeah.
Get a metal detector at schools. Get armed teachers. Those type of things. And then we find out, well, actually, there were some folks there that could have intervened.
Could've.
So again, that's not the only answer either. That's just part of that holistic discussion.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite words, by the way, holistic. I love that word.
Maybe that should have been the theme today.
No, but I mean, it is. You can't
Whip that up. He's going to go change that now.
that goes right back to exactly what we teach in our active shooter program, which is everybody's going to respond to as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't count on the plan working. So you have to have different layers of the plan. You have to be able to change the plan as circumstances change, and it's a perfect example. A guy with, I'm going to assume years of training, didn't do what he was supposed to do for. I wasn't there. I don't know what his reason is. I have my opinion.
He didn't bring a sidearm to an AR fight, I guess.
Right.
Isn't that what he said? I mean,
Yeah, but
we're not, maybe
I don't
didn't say
think
anything,
he.
but that's
I don't
the
think
theory.
he said that.
no.
That
But
was-
I mean that
You're right. Yeah.
And-
I don't know where I
and
heard
that's
that.
an excuse.
Yeah.
That's an excuse.
That's kind of like saying,
I'm not afraid to say it. The guy's a coward, right?
okay.
That was his job to protect those kids, and he didn't do it. He failed. Now, I've heard people say that maybe he fell back on past training, but ever since Columbine, the best practice has been first officer on scene, first officer in the building. He knew that. Departments all over the United States train on that. So that was a fail if that's what he did. If he was scared, okay, still a fail. I mean, you can't make an excuse for it.
Well, as far as law enforcement training goes, in a situation like this, I guess my question would be what is somebody in that situation trained to do? I mean, if you hear the active shooting, you know that it's it's you're outgunned.
Yeah.
Whatever you're hearing, you know
Doesn't matter.
Do you go in and go down? And what good does that do? Everybody who's inside, aren't they trained to wait for backup?
That's
isn't that what
old.
he's doing?
That's old
I'm just asking
tactics.
questions.
And
you know?
so that's so in my training, I can only speak for myself, but I don't go to any crazy training. I go to nationally accepted training. Like I said, first officer, maybe if there's 2 of them there, you enter the building because according to just anecdotal evidence and even the FBI's report on these things that they did for the shootings between 2000 and 2013, and I might not have the percentage exactly right, but upwards of 70% of these things are stopped as soon as any pressure is applied, and that's kind of the theory, right? So as soon as the officer can apply any pressure, it usually stops one way or the other. Either the officer shoots the bad guy shoots themselves, or they just give up or whatever. So that's why the thinking is the way it is. And so I would pose that, yeah, maybe he thought he was ungunned, but I would say that if he went in there and engaged that bad guy, that it probably would have stopped.
Potentially. Did he know there was only one person?
No, he probably didn't know that.
You don't get to know that.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So
I mean, it's not a. How do you want to say? It's not pretty no matter what. Are you walking into something where you're like, wow, I'm, as you said, here's one thing. I don't want to say I'm going to correct it. How many times do we hear the saying, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun? And you say what?
I say that's not true.
That's bullshit.
Yeah.
A lot of people can stop a person with a gun.
Yeah.
And like
the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy.
with a will to do something.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
hey,
it's so
it's
the
like
thing.
Sheriff Andy. He didn't carry a gun.
There you go, Sheriff
Right.
Mayberry. We talked about that.
Yeah.
If we could go back to Mayberry.
Yeah.
But in Mayberry, you could say, you're not from around here. I want to talk to you. That happened in Mayberry. So I don't recognize you walking down on Main
Felt like
Street.
a sore thumb in maybe.
Yeah. So, handgun versus rifle, not an excuse, as in something can be done.
But that's it. That is the nature of combat, okay? And whether people like to admit it or not, that officer was engaged in combat. He doesn't get to choose the circumstance. He volunteered. He says, I swear on the Constitution of the United States and in whatever city he had, that I will protect and defend, and that was his job, and he doesn't get to choose the time and place and circumstance. It doesn't matter. I'm pretty hard line about that because I've seen many, many people that have not returned to their families who did the same thing, who did not hesitate. And they didn't have any more information or any more, at certain circumstances, they may have been outgunned or overwhelmed or outnumbered, and it didn't matter because they swore an oath, and you need to uphold that oath.
Well, the gym teacher that jumped in front of the kids.
Right.
So
he
even paid to do what he did.
Yeah, he said, I'm protecting the kids, and he did, right? So
and there were the kids in the school that put up the Teflon shields over the other kids too, right?
Yep.
Or that, that other young guy that was holding the door.
Yeah, there was a couple of the junior ROTC members that
One of them
were helping people escape.
One was killed.
Well, there's 3 of them killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's my whole point as far as that goes.
That's also doing something.
Yeah.
Just like the guy at Virginia Tech holding the door closed, the teacher. What was it? One of them held the door closed.
Levesque.
Yes, there you go.
So armed guards at school is not necessarily going to stop it.
It's not going to
by
stop
itself,
everything, no.
Because that's going to depend on the individual officer's courage in that situation.
Understood.
Metal detectors, not necessarily either, depending on what access a disgruntled ex-student or other person might be able to get from past experience into the school or whatever it may be. So not the answer. I guess since we're talking about armed guards and metal detectors and things like that,
say courthouse.
We already talked about that last time I was here.
All right.
That's a rabbit hole. That's a different rabbit hole.
Yes.
I guess one thing that's crossed through my mind as we're talking about this is, okay, let's do it. Let's do the armed guards. Let's do the metal detectors. Let's make our schools about as secure as a prison. Because that's really what it is. It's going to come down to is a prison. You even talk about there being people afraid to be snitches inside. It's a prison mentality, right? So let's do that. But what are we going to do at the same time to make sure we don't have to do that anymore? That's where I want to go with the discussion, because I don't think most people really want that to be our new reality. That this is the way schools have to be, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you got to have
You know
that
what I mean?
balance, right? You want it to be a place for learning and welcoming and all that. You don't want, who wants to go to prison, right? Nobody
Right.
does. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Is that a great learning environment?
Yeah.
You know, to go to, be in fear and those type of things. So what are we doing while we're setting up these security measures that, you know, I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing to do. I mean, let's protect our kids first, right? What are we doing to make sure we don't have to do that as much anymore? That we can back off.
Now you switched it to as much, with I agree. Because what a lot of people don't like to say is, how do we make this stop? You're never going to make it stop. Never going to get humans to quit killing each other. All you can try to do is reduce those numbers. You know, there's always going to be a certain percentage. So what do we do? Got an idea, Mike?
Well, I mean, for one, you have to act on intelligence that you get, and you actually have to enforce the codes that we already have in place, right? That'd be a good start.
Is this sounding familiar, Nick? Enforce the things we already have?
It is.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering what things we had in place that we could have done.
So,
or that I wasn't.
yeah. So, and
right?
I'm not familiar with the laws in Florida, and I'm obviously not as familiar with the law in general as you are. However, I do have expectations, which are when somebody's repeatedly reported, they should be checked out, I guess, with quotes, which I don't believe he ever was in any serious way.
Well, then I've read everything from 20 times to 39 times that the local sheriff's department had dispatch calls or something. Who knows? And, of course, now the details, as in, like, it will now get full focus of how that was handled, right?
Sure.
I even saw saying that they're saying 2 deputies asked questions or did not do thorough reports and this and that. But what do you have, questions? You guys are
No,
staring.
I was just reading.
Sorry,
Are
I'm
you
listening
reading?
to you. I can do two
It's
things.
okay. You can do 2
Someone
things
had
at
a
once.
question for me.
Yeah, that's what I was reading as well.
Yeah.
We'll do it. Gun safety courses.
But it was
Wow.
kind of a silly question.
Do I
Matt-
believe
Matt's
it?
being silly.
Have
Okay.
any of you three, and everybody can hear me, have
Go
any
ahead.
of you three been to any of the training that schools have for a shooter, how to mitigate in case of an emergency? How do teachers respond? Have any of you been to those?
Yeah, I've been to multiple different programs, and I teach 2 of them.
Okay.
So how do teachers handle it? About like the general public does. Some of them are very like, heck yeah, I'm in. You know, and I'm not going to be stereotypical, but generally it's the football coach, security guard type guy that's like, yeah I'm in. I'm going to help out these kids. Whatever we need to do, we're doing it, and they're very enthusiastic. But then you have the folks like my mom, right? My mom's a retired teacher.
Sure.
When she retired, she was an older lady. She's not going to be as enthusiastic because it's not her worldview. Right?
Sure.
She doesn't understand. You have to understand violence, and if you don't understand violence, you can't really apply it. And I'm not talking about tackling and beating somebody up. Applying violence is to realize that something bad's happening and act whatever you're going to do. Just run out the door, barricade the door, whatever you're going to do, right?
Right.
You have to recognize violence to be able to react to violence. And there's a lot of people out there that don't understand violence, and they don't think it's going to happen to them. Even if they hear gunshots down the hallway, they're going to rationalize and say, oh, that's not a gun, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's part of the problem.
In general, I mean, I'm a parent. All my kids are in school, middle school, going into high school, but I don't understand the mentality or the idea of the defensive structure of how teachers are supposed to react, how students are supposed to react in these types of school shootings. So can you generalize the mentality of what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, in general, I mean, we've all heard of, most people have probably heard Run, Hide, Fight or the Alice program or everybody pretty much teaches the same stuff, right? Nobody that's serious is going to disagree that escaping or running or evading, whatever you want to call it, is the best answer, right? And then that's where things kind of diverge. So once you get to, hey, I can't do that anymore, some people advocate just hunker down and barricade, make yourself a hard target, hide, be quiet. Some people go a little farther than that, and they'll say, well, you need to respond physically if you have to. Kind of where I go, and where I teach things is you should do all those things and be prepared to do all those things and continue to improve your position. And maybe you run to a position of cover and then you barricade. And then when the guy goes past you and you think you're okay, then you run out the door. You know, it's not an all or nothing linear type thing.
Oh, you
I
mean
think
run?
what you're saying is this is an ongoing discussion.
Yes.
Nobody really knows what
Yeah,
to do.
no,
about it,
you're,
you know?
you're right.
So
And,
you're right.
and the
Because-
underlying issue here too is why do we have to have these drills? This is crazy. I mean, we do to protect ourselves.
do.
But why do we get to a point now where that's just a regular part of school, like a curriculum? Okay, now it's time to talk about what we do when there's an active shooter.
And we
And
didn't.
this kind of goes back to the kids. This is where we started here. Okay? Sorry to kind of whirl around like
Oh,
that.
that's
And
all
if
right.
you want to talk about something else,
Organized.
just cut me off.
No.
But, you know, the kids that are in the schools are the ones that have to do these drills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kids joke around. They act stupid. They're probably making fun of it while they do it. That's how teenagers
Some of them,
are.
they don't take it serious.
But what's going on through their mind when they're thinking, oh, we have to do an active shooter drill? What are the adults doing to make sure we don't have to do this anymore? What are the adults doing to make sure that we don't have a metal detector anymore, that we don't have to have an armed guard, those type of things? Kids I agree with what some folks have said, these kids that walk out and whatnot, stay in school, you know, learn about the Constitution, do stuff type of things, of course. But these are the kids that in these school shootings are the ones that are dying. You know, and they don't feel like anything's being done. And this is their way to have a voice for it. You know, we ask a lot of our children, especially the young people, the teenagers that are making their way in the world. I mean, we're handing them a world that's a steaming pile of shit. You know, and we're
said
asking them to deal with that. And then when they have a voice about it and say, hey, what are you doing for me? You know, I feel like there's not enough being done. And then there's a very strong contingent of people that criticize them for that.
Sure.
And then
Now, that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, I
to
don't
me.
agree with that. I don't actually.
I know
agree
you
with that.
don't, but you know, there's people out there that these kids need to learn about the Constitution. You know, well, isn't that what they're doing? They're demonstrating. That's the First Amendment.
One of my questions, though, as far as that goes, is the kids, you know, if they're asking, what are you doing? Is anybody explaining to them? Like, this is what we have done for you. Because I remember when I was 16, I was pretty self-absorbed. I was worried about wrestling practice and friggin' the dead Kennedys and everything else I was into, right? Girls, yeah.
Anybody that wrestles has like more focus and discipline than most kids.
I'll say anybody that's in a group activity, I'll say probably pretty focused on their. But I'll agree, wrestling's the
There's a
greatest
lot of
sport in the
different
world,
group
but,
activities today that didn't exist then.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, who has anybody explained to these kids? Like, I think they may be going. Some of them, not all of them, because everybody, you know, kids are just like anybody else. Everybody's got their own level of awareness, but some of them may be kind of commenting from a place of ignorance, right?
Yeah.
They just don't know.
That happens with any group of people, though, that some of them will. Yeah, like if you went and interviewed if you walked up and interviewed every single kid out marching right now or protesting and say, what do you think should be done? Or what do you think's going on? Or what do you think the answer is? It would be interesting to see what those, you know, you're going to get some good answers, some bad answers, some articulate answers, and some crazy unicorn stuff too. And that's a mixture. That's a mixture of our culture today. I mean, that's the real world, right?
They have that little bit of idealism that sometimes we need to be slapped across the face with. I mean, a lot of us have just become used to the cruel world the way it is. There's always going to be criminals. There's always going to be murders. There's always going to be crime. Who
knows that better than you, though?
But, you know, we need a little test of idealism once in a while to test the standard in the status quo.
Sure.
So as long as these walkouts are followed by action, by discussion, then it can be nothing but good for society, I think, to get young people involved. I mean, a lot of times we criticize young people for being apathetic. I mean, I'm Generation X. That was the number one criticism against my generation.
Yeah.
Apathy. Get your flannel shirts on, right, Shane? And complain about the world. Turn on your Nirvana music, and you know you're not doing anything. Well, these kids are trying to do something. Let's let them talk and let's have a discussion.
I totally agree. And at the same time, you know what? Some people don't want to hear how popular. When I say popular, how consistent in the world of training that you go to, and I'm going to say, is the idea that no one's coming to save you.
I would call it a baseline assumption.
It's a baseline assumption that everyone has to have. And people get mad when you say, you're going to tell my kid that he can't expect someone to come help him. What I'm telling you is you have to plan on knowing that no one's going to come help you. And if they do, it's a bonus, right? Like, and when people say, well, they're not ready to do that. Well, 14-year-olds fighting for their life are the same as a 50-year-old fighting for life, but people don't want to be told that. But it is, I mean, it's like we're talking surviving human violence. So when we say, are they ready for the real world, just like you teach, is everybody's going to act differently or individually first and then decide if the football team is going to tackle this guy anyway, right? The football, and, you know, those things happen. They do. Or a teacher walks up and puts a hand on them and they just quit shooting, right?
Which happened.
So like you said, when they meet some kind of resistance, and that resistance might be getting yelled at by a teacher that they somewhat respect, right? Which is weird in the middle of a shooting, but it happens. So I just want to focus on, and I like where you're going, Nick. Like, I like how you bring up your daughter and say, okay, what's going to happen in her lifetime? You got to remember how you and I met. All I can do factually is start at how to survive violence and go backwards. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be that so-and-so that comes to my store had to live through an attack and she survived because she did this, this, and this. I wish she was never attacked. Mm-hmm. But I have to start there and go backwards. And I have to count on smarter people, maybe, if you want to say that, to start at the beginning. But it's going to take generations. Yeah. Literally. I mean, people don't want to be told that, but it's going to take generations. When I sat in two different multiple okay, I'll call one a think tank and the other one is a meeting. It's still common to say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And that was about local violence that you're very familiar with. And somebody started saying, when are these kids need to come from stronger homes where they're held accountable and there needs to be stronger families.
I see the comment earlier and I agree entirely with that.
Yeah,
we do need
Which
stronger
one?
Families. Matt. They're
less parent, yeah.
My side, yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, Matt, I agree.
But how intrusive is that, right? To step in and start telling people, you're not doing a very good job parenting. You need to spend more time with your kid at the dinner table. You need to harp on him about his homework. You got to be more engaged with your kid. And people will say that's super intrusive, correct? Do you agree with that or not?
Some people would say that, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But do some people want to be able to see my medical records before I can buy a gun? Is that intrusive?
I've heard that floated.
Yep. And I'm not. Yeah.
Let's talk about that because, Mike, you just said earlier that, that we need to act on intelligence. Yep. And that's not exactly the same thing, but the current system we have to be able to check out people like Nicholas Cruz is going to miss people like Nicholas Cruz. It is.
Why
a call
miss
to
him?
Well, Ernie, you tell me, a call to residents, or 19 calls. Does that come up on a background check?
Nope.
Okay. So how do we make that happen?
Yeah, that's the golden question, right? How do we protect people's rights to privacy and other, protections and still protect society as a whole? That's the $1 million question.
That's the constitutional conundrum right there. I mean, you nailed it.
How many times do you know people that are proven violent people in Cedar Rapids that have continued to be violent for years and nothing can be done because they haven't been convicted, right? It doesn't show up on a background check.
Yep.
So, but where do you, and this is, when I say, let me play devil's advocate, I understand some of, I'll say, the local sheriffs in the area that say, that guy would have never had a permit if it was up to me. I get that they're coming from. And when I say I don't agree with it, I believe in shall issue. But even as shall issue as we have, if you believe totally strongly that Mr. X right over here can't have a permit, you can deny it. That's what I get tired of people saying, well, you can't deny it. He can deny it. He's just going to have to go and legally prove why he did it. And that's where when you say people all need to step up, then step up. If you can go and prove, and that would be even interesting to learn more about that system, and you can just hear you can hear the pro-gun guy that's hating me right now, but that's okay. The state of Iowa doesn't know jack shit yet about what stand your ground means, do they?
No.
Even the legal system, I think,
they just had their first.
Oh, we're talking.
The very first, I don't know.
When I say real one,
it's going to be the case that other stuff is going to be built on eventually. I think.
We'll let him speak about that too.
No, absolutely.
Maybe. Because if it's not a case, then is it a case, right?
Yeah. We can get into that in a minute, but some of the things the judge had to do were interesting.
Sure. But it's
had to do.
Well,
the judge is kind of making his own.
Yeah,
course
they do their own thing.
Guidance from the legislature,
right, exactly.
So.
The hoops he had to jump through. I guess.
So it would be interesting for I don't know, somebody smart like you, because you have all this extra time, is how hard is it for a sheriff to say, no, I know you, I know this, this, and this, and, you know, my deputies have been to your place 14 times. I'm denying you a permit. I know you're going to go get a lawyer and make a big deal, and you're going to say it's because I'm white or I'm brown or I'm this or I'm that. But knowing that fight's coming, how could they fight it? I think sheriffs would be very interested for someone to teach them, say, you know, I know it's a hard road, but if you really feel strongly about it, this is how you get them out of there. Yeah. We need that too.
Yeah, I think a lot of sheriffs feel like their hands are tied. They hear shall issue, and that's what they do. You know, they take an oath to enforce the law, and the law tells them you shall issue. That's what they do. Yeah. You know, and I've got a lot of calls of people, you know, of
shall issue? Oh, sorry. You're our voice of reason. Shall issue is it is a state right to go get your permit if you haven't been if you have not been legally, I guess when I say legally committed, you have not if you've been if you're a felon, convicted, if you're a domestic violence person of any degree, convicted, if you're dishonorably discharged, right? That's important. So you can't get a permit. So shall issue just means the sheriff has to give it to you unless they can prove why you don't get to have it. So, but
unless you're disqualified for some other.
Sure. Yeah. All those.
So Cole made a point about kind of the discussion we were talking about medical stuff, but you have to change HIPAA. So I'm probably going to screw this up because everybody just calls it HIPAA, but the Health Insurance Portability Act, I believe, is what HIPAA stands for. And that's going to be a slippery slope as well and a tough road because it is so, you know, I work in the medical field, you know, as my 9 to 5, whatever job, and the lines are drawn. Mm-hmm. If we take a patient from their house, like I went in their house and picked them up.
My sister.
Right. Okay.
Shh, don't say it was you.
No, I won't. Anyway, take a patient from the house to the hospital and drop them off. As soon as we give report and, you know, quote unquote transfer care, I no longer have the right to ask any questions, which is very frustrating as a care provider because sometimes I want to know what happened and I want to know if my treatment helped or if I was going totally down the wrong road with that, right? Because I don't have x-ray vision and quite honestly, I have to go with signs and symptoms and make my best guess on the treatment in the back of the ambulance. And to know if I was right, in my opinion, would help other people. So once I recognize those signs and symptoms again, I'll be like, oh, well, last time it was this, so it's more than likely this. I can do this. But we don't get that because HIPAA won't let you do that.
Sure.
And that's just one example. HIPAA is a very, very convoluted situation, right?
Oh, yeah.
You deal with it.
Yeah, you know, it just kind of popped into my mind, so maybe I shouldn't say things that just pop into my mind. But
sorry, I do it all the time.
When you talk about, and I do deal with a lot, you talk about medical records, a very clean way to obtain medical records is to obtain a waiver from that person. So perhaps the discussion should be about not can the government get into your medical records if you are attempting to obtain a firearm and there are concerns, present somebody with a waiver. If they don't sign it, then there's a procedure in place where there has to be some demonstration made with clear and convincing evidence, or it might be that there's a concern enough to get into the medical records. Judge issues a subpoena, judge looks at it, judge it's in camera, which means the judge doesn't share any of the findings until the judge makes a conclusion on it.
So it escalates to some degree.
Yeah, and I don't think the judges are going to want to sign up to take part in all these different, but how, you know, these different analyses, but how often is that really going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, when it comes down to it, is that not a way? And okay, we have concerns about you. Would you mind signing this waiver? No. Okay,
so how many of
those have to go another route?
But
what's the form? What's the form that you have to fill out?
4473.
Okay, so out of the form 4473s, how many do you do a week?
A week?
Just
hundreds.
Average.
Hundreds.
Out of those hundreds. And just ballpark figure, how many people check yes to any of those disqualifying things?
None. I have about maybe 2. I probably have I've probably had 20 denials, true denials, where somebody came in, tried to buy a gun, said they could buy a gun. And when I say said they could buy a gun, filled out the form like they could, and truly got denied. And
because they lied on the form, but the background check caught them, right?
Yep.
So
and so when people say, "Oh my God, they've only caught 20," what you need to realize is out of what are we up to now? I'm going to say just CVO, not even my career before CVO, which was full-time in guns. Just in CVO, I think we're at probably about 55,000 guns. So it's super rare. But again, this is somebody coming to a gun store. But then people can circle back and say the guy in Florida did everything legal.
Well,
What I
right,
mean
but
is-
I'm kind of piggybacking on what Nick said. So if you have like 20 people out of
Yep.
54,000, and you know, people buy multiple guns or whatever, and out of those 20 people, maybe one of them wants to, okay, I'll sign your waiver. You know what I mean? Wants to fight it,
Yeah.
right? So I think the
Or
incident,
I'm not going to sign your waiver.
or I'm
You're
not going to,
fighting it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the incidence would be even lower than that.
And of the people denied my thing, some of them got that cleared up. It was merely, it was actually an issue between state law enforcement and federal law enforcement, how something was reported. Because in the long run, I've had people that got shut down on the Form 4473, but the sheriff's department issued them a carry permit. It's not because the sheriff's department did anything wrong. It's because they actually put more effort into looking up the background to say, yeah, that was a drug charge, but it was this long ago and it was only this level or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Just
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah.
But what he's mentioning, just because you know you're going to have the other people say, is sign this waiver to look into your medical records to have a constitutional freedom. We're up against that. And when I say we, I'll be up against that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff I see people
I go back to
say-
the slippery slope thing.
Oh, yeah, there's a
It's
lot
not
of
an
people
easy
out-
answer.
There's
That's
a
a
lot
good
of people
point.
out there
It is.
speaking. There's a guy named Mike that I met online. He thinks everybody should have to be smarter before they can speak. See, like me. So I'm not saying I disagree. Would I vote against that? Yeah, I would fight Nick against that. But that's why he's here. We got to say, what can we really do if we're really serious? But
vote against what, though? I mean,
Well,
you don't
what-
have to sign the waiver.
no, exactly.
There's
What
just
I'm,
a procedure that
what I'm
takes place
saying is
after
if
that.
they started, you didn't suggest this. If people come along and say, okay, everybody that wants to buy a gun, you have to do this to be able to buy a gun. That won't fly. We know that.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, I want to see about, like, you know, you should start saying, why shouldn't everybody see everybody else's medical records, right?
And then that's the problem, right? That's something
Sure.
that HIPAA prevents or whatever. But
Yeah.
And I think one thing to focus on here is what you just talked about, Ernie, is that, you know, how many people have failed a background check, that type of discussion.
Yeah.
So along those same lines, we're just not going to catch the problems with people coming to your store. So this kind of presents
Very
a topic
few of them
that-
anyway, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Very few of them, over thousands versus
Sure.
you know, just about a dozen or so. So this is kind of brings up a topic that I have a lot of interest in, and I think I admittedly need to learn more about before I have a full discussion on it. But the concept of universal background checks.
Sure.
You know,
You and I have talked about this. We're allowed, I'm allowed to say that.
yeah. So
Bring on the hate. So,
well, but I guess what it comes down to me is I trust guys like you, Ernie, who do this as a profession to do it right, and you know, most of the time those background checks are probably going to work to stop somebody who needs to be stopped. It's not foolproof, nothing is.
yeah.
But what about the private transfer of guns? That's where criminals, prohibited people get guns. They don't walk into a gun store and fool Ernie over and end up with an AR-15 and walk out. They get it on the streets, the private transfer of firearms. So what can be done or what should be done about that? About
So-
making sure that we...
Two things. Here we
Okay.
go. You ready? Remember, I told everybody they would like this show. It'll be engaging.
just a minute, just before you get going,
Here we
Roland,
go.
don't lose your
No.
train of thought. But we're being heckled, just so you know.
By who?
Grant's heckling us.
Grant. Wait, is it the Grant?
Yeah.
Wait, the Battle of... Oh, my God.
Anyway, moving
Yeah.
on. What? Go
No, we do need a smile.
Yeah.
So two things. So first of all, and I talked about with some customers in my store the other day, say, you guys remember this. Remember I said this before these things happen. Do you have an issue if the government comes along and says you can't sell a gun to your neighbor without taking it to a dealer and having a, or better yet, please, if I'm going to say I support this, please understand, why doesn't the government set up a system to where two private people can go there and they can run a background check and don't involve me? Because if I say that I don't have an issue with this, it's all going to be because you're a gun store and you want to make transfer fees. Really, the last thing I want to do is meet two people that are trying to buy a gun as inexpensive as they can and be stuck in the middle of it and have to explain to them, dude, you needed to have the current address on your driver's license. Hey, your permit needed to be issued in the last however many years. You know, no, your Arby's receipt does not count as a government issued ID with your current
That's
address on it.
awesome.
Well, so the point is, first and foremost, I don't want to have to be the dealer involved in those. But I've even seen many intelligent people suggest, why can't the police department facilitate a sale between two people, right? Like, why can't you go to the police department and say, A, is this gun stolen? Nope. Turns out it's not. And B, can I sell it to this guy legally? And they can run a background check and say, yep. And then fine. Do I have an issue with that? No, I don't. That'll piss off a lot of people, but I don't.
How do you reconcile that with the fundamental right, what people call constitutional carry? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, a lot of folks that make the argument about the dangerousness of guns being similar to the dangerousness of cars, which is, valid argument to a certain extent. We can always
they're both things that get used by people.
Differentiate the argument, but you have to fill out that paperwork to sell a car, or you should.
But you can sell a car to a felon and a wife beater and an alcoholic. You can sell a car to somebody that has 10 DUIs. But you actually can't sell a gun to a person with 10 DUIs. So I get it. And it's like statistics or anything else is we can run it. Like I always told people, I would be the ultimate guy to work for the other team. If you wanted to hire me to go tear apart the gun world, what I'd focus on is the hard-nosed people that all they want to do is yell and scream. Seen that lately?
There's a lot of those people.
Yeah.
I get more arguments with pro-gun people than I do anti-gun people.
I agree. Yeah,
I really do.
Well,
I get arguments with both. So.
Yeah,
right, there you go.
You're lucky. And when I say arguments, like I try to post, if you can not name call and don't drop F-bombs left and right, I don't care you have an opposing view. But also where we don't get anywhere is if you completely just don't listen to the facts. When people are like, they're buying these guns everywhere. Not bad guys aren't buying guns legally everywhere. Did the kid in Florida? Sure, he did. Yeah. I mean, and that's a devastating example. And I get why it's emotional. I get why it's the focus. But it would be mind-bending for some people to say, by the way, do you know that in the last 3 days, the ATF will release the numbers here, how many millions of background checks there's been in the last week? Millions for gun purchases. So the fact that mere guns and the presence of them, 300, 400 million, they say, which there's probably more than that, I'm going to say. The mere idea that all these guns are causing this, you and I talked about the fact that, gun ownership, literally, factually, you go back to the early 2000s, gun ownership skyrockets more than 100%, while crime, proudly, the government's proud to tell you, crime's 0.51% decreasing. So I'm not saying more guns made you safer. I'm saying 100% more guns in a span of only 12 years didn't make the world more dangerous. There you go. Let's go backwards now.
Ernie, I got a question for you.
Fire away, Shane. Okay. Voice of logic.
Yeah, so everybody can hear me. What do you think that the situation being focused on after the school shooting is the wrong focus? Everybody is pointing to guns, gun control, gun permits, who should be buying guns, how are they buying guns, background checks. But I haven't heard as much of the discussion on what was happening to that kid. Was there bullying? What was going on in the family life? And do we need to focus a lot more on what is causing, 1 + 3 + 7 = a mass shooter? You
mean
it's where you get holistic.
Sure.
And that's tough.
It's the difference between prescribing a pill for a headache or realizing, hey, you should probably just drink more water so you don't get a headache.
There you go.
Yeah.
I know people were reporting to the sheriff and the FBI was involved, but is this or am I going down the wrong path? Is this too much of a minority report type of thing where you're saying, okay, hey, there's posts on Facebook that are odd. Oh, by the way, this kid just lost both of his parents. Oh, by the way, there's great depression and loss. Should we have this kid under a microscope? And by doing that, are we stepping on anybody's rights?
So what? So
how much?
Are we focusing too much on guns and not enough on the human
I'm going to
element?
pose the theory, I guess, that you can't save everybody, and that sometimes you got to go to personal responsibility, and sometimes people are just bad. I was listening to an interview this morning. If you guys are familiar, you may not have ever heard of this guy, but in the circles that I kind of frequent, he's pretty famous. His name's David Coggins. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, ex-U.S. Air Force pararescueman. He holds the world's record for pull-ups in 24 hours. He did 14,000 pull-ups in 24 hours. He's run 205 miles. This guy's just a machine, right? So people talked to him a lot about mental preparation and all that. And his life story as a young man is absolutely horrible. It's probably equal or as worse as this kid's. He was beaten by his father, who used to beat his mother, and his father was a pimp and a drug runner. And he lived in a town with like 10 other black families because he's Native, or not Native American, African American, and a lot of racism and all that stuff in the early 90s when he was growing up. But he went down the path of, I'm going to prove these people wrong, not I need to get everybody, I need to get back at everybody.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So when do we start saying it's not always society's fault? Everybody gets dealt the same hand to a certain extent.
No,
Not everybody, and everybody in the same area would probably get dealt the same hand. I mean, you probably have 10 different results, right? If you have 10 different families, you have 10 different results.
So to go back and answer Shane, you try to do something in every category. I know that holistic. And when people can be mad that Ernie suggested every category, but if you have a proposal of what gun law is going to help, I'd like to see it. The only thing I ask is, let's base it off like facts, like actual facts, and those are very emotional for people from the point of view that 17 people just got killed. I get it. It's emotional. It's horrible. They all, just like Nick said, these kids have a right to speak out. The parents have a right to be mad, and whatever helps them get through this. And many of them are motivated to never see it happen to someone else again. Anybody that understands me knows how compassionate I actually am about that. At the same time, that makes me a horrible person when I say, dude, you're talking about the type of events, and it's specifically the rifle that doesn't kill 1% of the people in America that are killed by guns. That infuriates people, saying you don't care. I do care. I'm just saying people want to call gun violence. First, everybody talks about gun violence. I care about violence, right? Okay, everyone wants to do something about gun violence. Have people been choked to death in Linn County, Iowa?
Yeah.
Have they been beaten to death?
Yeah.
With and without objects? Stabbed? Drug underneath a car and erased until half her body was gone? All these things that if you can go back and remember in time what humans will do to each other, right? But I understand.
There's only one way you can kill somebody from a vehicle driving by shooting to their house, though, which is
Sure.
what people talk about when they talk about gun violence, a specific type of violence that we believe, that folks believe, want to believe, hope to believe, that you can actually do something about.
Okay, you bring up something. Maybe it was
So
the perfect curveball. How many more people are killed in drive-by shootings than they are school shootings?
That is a really good point. I don't have those statistics.
Do you, based on your own experience, think it's more?
Yeah, definitely. And,
like Jacksonville, Florida?
Yeah, precisely. And to kind of go back to what Shane brought up, too, the concern about school shootings and the concern about gun violence is not in a vacuum, okay, or violence in general.
Yeah.
What is contributing to drive-by shootings to children in Jacksonville, Florida, 5 in a period of 10 days, is that what the article said?
I think, yeah.
5, maybe 11 days, but 5 children were shot in drive-by shooting type incidents in Jacksonville, Florida.
When I say true innocence, caught in the middle of gunfire.
Right.
Yeah.
They're literally playing in their front yard and shot. What causes that to occur is different than what causes Nicholas Cruz to go into school and shoot. Okay,
Totally agreed.
So let's not look at the whole issue in some kind of vacuum where there's an easy fix to it.
Because there isn't.
When we talk about a lot of guns being available in the disadvantaged, more violent communities, what's causing that to occur? What's causing the rampant use of firearms in that area to do the drive-by shootings? What caused Nicholas Cruz to be able to walk into a school and shoot 17 of his former students or his former friends, classmates, whatever? Two different things.
Oh, they are. But I care about both.
Right. We should have a conversation about both. It's just not an easy answer. It kind of is what I'm saying to Shane, too.
Yes.
In some sense, you got to talk about the availability of firearms and the populations where the drive-by shootings are happening. What can we do? Is our stiffer laws or consideration of some aspect of universal background checks a good idea? Because you can actually catch somebody in a transfer of a firearm if you do the right investigation. That was where somebody sold a firearm to a person who was prohibited.
I totally agree that would happen. But again, when you said earlier, What do we do about the criminals? The criminals aren't going to do that. I mean, and you know that. There's going to be, I got to listen to that, you know, again, I quote during the Martin case, where did you buy the gun? The hood.
Right.
You know, well,
So
there's
does-
no background checks at the hood, and they're not going to go to the police department. And that's a real case, right here in Cedar Rapids, to where, but I get what you mean. When I say I'm down for that, I would look at that proposal. I would support that as a, you know, people keep saying, you're going to do it because you're a gun dealer. Really, let's keep the gun dealers out of it, you know? But however, like you said, when they come to a dealer, and I don't care which competitor it is, mine even in town, they're doing the same thing. They're using the same system. You know, they will get a red flag here and there. They'll stop those people. But that's literally not, when I say not what I'm worried about, I'm worried about the people trading guns, selling guns for drugs, and everything else going on in this town. Sitting there listening to that conversation that I did, not conversation, an actual court case where the person is testifying saying, oh yeah, I just called up so-and-so and I told him I wanted a 9mm and I had one the next day. It's like that's just like everyday life for.
It's always fascinating to me when I get a gun related case to dig into the reports and try to figure out how that gun got into the person's hands.
Sure. And how many of
You know,
them?
and it's not, hey, I went and bought it from Ernie.
No.
It's usually a lot different manner in which that happens.
And I also have an issue. When I say I have an issue, you can go backwards. I don't care. Long before any of this, and hear me preaching, I only blame the bad guys. But hey, good guys, lock your stuff up, man. Quit having your guns stolen. That, by the way, some of those guns stolen. Has a stolen gun around here ever killed somebody in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Linn County, Iowa?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Like, that's a fact people can go look up, right?
Yeah.
Free to, you know, they can go and learn.
Legally purchase and possess a gun is not usually
No, but
the weapon in a murder case.
But statistically, and this is not a what if, there's other people on the other thing that say, you know, most guns used in crimes were bought legally. No. I understand you can go back and say, this Smith & Wesson Model 19 was bought legally in 1963. But what happened to it? Just like the gun from Marion that was legally purchased that ended up killing somebody else later after it was stolen. I understand, you know, so I don't blame the homeowner criminally, but my God, you're going to have to step up and say, I'm not going to make my stuff easy to steal because I don't want to live with those demons and I don't want to put myself at any possible criminal or civil.
Is it reasonable to leave a 40 caliber Glock and an AK-47 in an unlocked vehicle in a driveway?
No, it isn't.
Is that reasonable?
That's an ass clown. And when people say,
even just from
but
a
that
monetary
happens.
standpoint,
well,
like that's a lot of money
Sure.
sitting out there unsecured in your car.
so when people say,
Bold. That
It is
bold.
very
Yeah.
bold.
but it's when people say, oh, well, I understand you expect your property to be safe in your car on your own property. Great that if you truly aren't worried that that's going to get stolen, then it's back to where I'll say the pro-gun people are even as clueless as the anti-gun people about what's really going on.
Right.
How
Join us
many
in reality,
burglaries?
if you don't
How many
mind.
guns have been stolen in the last, you know, ask your cop friends, how many guns have been stolen in the last 30 days in different little small towns I won't name and everywhere else. It's not it happens here or there thing. People steal stuff out of vehicles. People break into houses. But the vehicle thing that's the super bad one. That's just so easy to get guns out of a car, right? Unlocked cars. Recently, the only guns taken were out of unlocked cars. Didn't even want to break glass and cause any like commotion, right? I don't want to break your window if I can just go to the neighbor's car and open it because it's not locked. Steal guns out of there.
So this kind of, in all this discussions, made me. It kind of brings up a question that was asked of me, and I kind of asked Nick about it, and kind of segues into this discussion pretty good, I think. So, do you think, as a deterrent to keep these people from illegally obtaining weapons, are the penalties harsh enough? Are they spending enough time incarcerated for these things? I mean, I have no idea what the ratio of people that get caught violating these laws. What happens to them? I really have no idea.
I don't know. Are you even allowed to?
Is it a deterrent?
Are you allowed to have a personal?
It's not a deterrent to people who never think they're going to get caught.
Right. So they don't
That's-
think they're
but
going to
that's-
get caught. Once they do get caught, do they care about what happens, or is it just like whatever?
Once they get caught, they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole. That's a discussion for the whole philosophy of punishment. Maybe that's for another show. But just to kind of address what you're saying, what are we looking for out of punishment? Are we looking for a deterrent effect on other people? Are we looking to rehabilitate this specific offender? You know, what were the circumstances in which this gun ended up being in this prohibited person's hands? What was their intention with it? You know, there's going to be a lot of different aggravating factors, I think, are going to decide what an appropriate punishment for that is. I know that there's a distinct difference between what happens and occurs in federal court and what happens in state court. If somebody ends up being in possession of a firearm and they're a drug user or a domestic abuser or a felon, the consequences are going to be a lot stiffer for that than in state court. But yeah, every situation's is different. I'm a very strong advocate of coming down hard on prohibited persons. And it may not necessarily even be that particular prohibited person was out with bad intentions doing it. But we've got to draw a line where we can actually do something about gun violence, about violence with firearms. And we find that people that have bad intentions or prohibited folks are the ones that, you know, are going to cause the most problems with.
And me going by what I read in these newspapers and the Waterloo Courier and other things is that's a very common term, is prohibited person and repeat offender. So we live in the world of second chances. I even saw the proposed marijuana bill the other day, which that's a whole nother, like, don't give a rat's ass about 1 ounce of marijuana, less than 5 grams.
Less than 5 grams.
You know,
As Ron White said, you know, less than an ounce of marijuana is being out of marijuana.
Yes.
I was watching his comedy
20
special
years
the
ago,
other
that
day.
ended up on the pavement.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yep. So, but let's go back to like what you said is, you know, you can't say, well, this prohibited person, well, he's a felon because he embezzled 200 grand from some downtown investment company. That's way different than this guy who beats his wife and for the third time, and he's a felon. So, you know, Nick's not going to send this guy to, you know, 10 years state, but this guy might get it. I understand you have to be fair. You just have to draw a line and say, if you're a prohibited person and you're in possession of a firearm, because you trying to improve,
It's got to be black and white to a certain extent.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yep. So there is no questioning you, or you're showing favoritism here. It's just you're a prohibited person in possession of a firearm, you know. Because most people, if I'm going to say do white-collar money crime kind of thing, embezzling things, they're probably not willing to own a firearm illegally to risk going back to prison. But we see the words repeat offender a lot when it comes to drug-related violence, drug charges, you know, and when I say, when people, don't blame it on drugs, I'm just talking about the fact they had both drugs and an illegally possessed firearm. I'm just saying that that's not an uncommon thing. That's not saying every stoner has a gun. What I'm saying is, you're lying if you don't look at the fact that how often those two things go together.
Right.
So,
what are the risk factors that contribute to somebody who is in possession of a gun taking it a step further to do something to harm somebody? Well, their history. What makes them a prohibited person?
Sure.
The fact that they're actively using drugs that cause the impairment that could lead to poor decision making, those type of things. And the whole prohibited person area of the law is the one thing for a large part that everybody agrees on, from the pro-gun and the anti-gun faction. I mean, I haven't heard a lot of even very staunch pro-gun people say we shouldn't have prohibited people.
Yeah,
but that is actually diminishing a right, is it not?
It is, but I think people are pretty. It's been well established that I don't know if I'm going to even use the right word. You can not curtail rights, but you can. There's precedents like, and I'm going to use the old cliche: you can't, fire in a movie house type deal, right?
Yep.
So there has to be
absolute.
Yes, there has to be limitations, and it's pretty well established. I think people understand that. And they're okay with that as long as it's whatever. And that's I think where we get into the problem. People's opinion is what a reasonable limitation is differ, and that's where the arguments are coming.
When you start saying 10-round magazine, 20-round magazine, 30-round magazine, they will differ.
Yeah.
And I got a question about that.
I knew you would. I knew you would.
What is the standard magazine that police officers carry with them in their firearm?
In what gun?
Well, what's a 40 caliber Glock?
15 rounds.
The 15 round?
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard 10, 12, 15.
No.
It just
100% no. If it's a 40
so it's
caliber,
usually 15.
15.
Okay. All right. So, and that's a fairly high capacity magazine, I suppose. I mean, 15 shots, you ought to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish when you withdraw your firearm. So, I guess my question is,
Not always.
is it okay? is it acceptable? Is it something that we're prepared to just accept as reality that there are going to be citizens who are going to be more heavily armed than police officers without there being a regulation on them obtaining that? Shouldn't the playing field at least be even?
I think any officer that thinks all things are, none of them go to calls thinking all things are going to be even. I don't want to say no officer does that, but are you saying like, an officer should never show up and somebody has a 30-round magazine instead of the 15-round magazine?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying in order to get a 30-round magazine, should there be extra steps taken? Should there be more caution taken in order to get to that point? If you're going to be a citizen who's going to be out-arm a potential police officer, I think all of us as a society might have an interest. Again, no rights are absolute. We all live in the same society. As to why it is you feel that you need that capacity. Let's talk about that. Let's make sure that we do these extensive type of background checks that we talk about. Maybe look at the police calls. Maybe go the medical record route. Whatever it may be.
Sure.
I think that's like a conversation that a lot of people from the gun control faction want to have. At least they want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to whether there might be some kind of middle ground there.
So I think there's a couple different, I'm going to say, problems with deciding how much ammunition you can have. So one problem that I would raise is if we start regulating, and I'm going to call a magazine a part, right? It's a component of the weapon system,
Part, yeah.
right? If we start regulating those individually, then we go down the path of we can start regulating. We could just, if you want to control the gun, you just say, I can't have this kind of trigger anymore. So that's, people are not going to accept that, I don't think. So that's one problem. The other problem is going back to the rights issue and what people believe are reasonable limitations to rights. Personally, I don't want somebody to tell me how many rounds I need, because my decision on how many I need to defend myself, my right to self-defense, somebody else should not be able to tell me, well, I only think you need 10. 10's good. Your life's worth 10.
Yeah.
Well, I think my life's worth 1,000. What do you think about that?
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We differ on that, so
Absolutely, yeah.
there's going to be a big disconnect
Mike
as far
McElmeel
as
seems
that
like
goes.
the type of guy that could handle a 30-round magazine and use it responsibly.
Yeah. And that
Is
is
Nicholas Cruz?
Yeah. That
Like, we all
But
kinda
I'm
agree
saying
not
that
the
that's
case,
where the fight's
so-
going to be, though.
yeah. The fight's
Right.
going to be is that there's more of me and you than there is of him. But then, when people say, well, you guys don't, it's easy for us to say, why don't you trust me with it? I'm not running around killing people. And then other people end up saying, that's not worth it. It doesn't matter that it's 1,000,000 to 1 ratio on who owns it responsibility and who doesn't. They're going to focus on the one. And I get why they're focusing on the one, because we didn't kill 17 people, me and him,
Yeah.
But
I get the slippery slope too.
Oh,
I mean, that's
sure.
But
and when you say
that's
15
an easy
rounds,
go-to argument for anything. Then
When you
and
say
then
15
the conversation
rounds.
ends at that point in time.
Sure. Well, no, and it's you and I talked about this the other day. You and I personally said, when you're like, can you tell me why you need a 30-round magazine? And I can give
Just
you
a question.
examples. Sure. I can give you examples of when people needed that. Some civilian, whole bunch law enforcement. Just like when you said if you would think 15 rounds is enough. That's definitely not enough. Definitely not enough, especially in the world of law enforcement. The most famous film on that would be your Dean Keller film, which you know as the guy getting out of the white Ford Ranger coming back at the officer who goes through 2 magazines and still gets killed by a guy who had 15 bullets with him. The other guy who had 15, cop had, you know that film very well, right?
Yeah.
So, but I get it that people associate with, like, look at the rolling gunfight out in San Bernardino, right? Remember them? Go to the Christmas party, kill your coworkers, and then have a rolling gunfight with the cops.
But I guess to me, it boils down to, I don't believe that's a reasonable restriction. Like, this is what we just talked about. Like, what is a reasonable limitation? And I don't think you do either. And I don't know if Nick does or not. I know he's just posing the question. But to me, I get to decide how many rounds my life is worth, not you, not
But
the governor, whoever, right?
And I think that any proposal would allow you to have that, to make that decision, because you are a responsible person. You could pass whatever check, whatever reasonable regulation, whatever that means, could be in place, but Nicholas Cruz would not. Many people would not pass that. And I also get the argument too that there's going to be those individual situations like you just talked about where, you know, a guy with only 15 round capability ends up wiping out some, you know, police officers who, and so it wouldn't matter if he had 30 or not. Okay. And this is where we have to be careful in this debate about the nirvana fallacy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what that is. But
Probably, maybe not.
And I'm not talking about Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Right.
I'm talking about
I love those guys.
the Nirvana fallacy, and maybe I'm just Gen X talking, right? But this is the fallacy that if something doesn't work 100% of the time, it's not worth pursuing.
Sure.
And we can get really caught up in that in a hurry.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of makes me cringe when I hear debates is well, criminals aren't going to follow laws anyway, so we don't need new laws. Well, that seems to me like throwing your hands up in the air. You know, you're not going to catch everyone with everything you do, but we can't shut down debate because something doesn't work to 100% perfection. And that's the Nirvana fallacy. And I feel like we need to kind of continue to talk after we've addressed, okay, we realize this isn't 100% perfect. What can we do to make it at least effective, statistically, significantly effective?
So at what point, and Heather has a very good question up there. Heather used to live around here, and she moved. She's still a pretty big fan of CVO, but she has a very good question there. So kind of in that vein, if we're going to start limiting, you know, say we do have a background check system or whatever, and if you're not a prohibited person, you can still get a 30-round magazine. But if we're going to start limiting parts, then what about limiting training for private citizens?
Or limiting abilities.
Do we start going down that road?
Nobody wants to fight the evil twin version of like Jerry Mischlick from Smith & Wesson.
Right.
Or pick these ultimate fighter dudes, let alone gunfighter dudes. So, but again, but she has a great question. That's true. Like I keep looking like
so where do we draw that line? Like this is okay for you, but it's not okay for you. I just have a real.
Have we got anywhere today?
Yeah,
we are.
Well, and again,
solving the world's problems.
Again, her question, Heather is saying, with more training, would that allow me to carry a magazine that carries more rounds?
That's kind of how I read it. And
right?
Yeah.
If I'm better trained, if I put in the time, am I proving that I can handle things?
I read
the
it.
reasonable regulation aspect of that is in order to get those more high capacity ones, there's a certain amount of training you need in order to do that. I mean,
but I read it as so I'm going to read it. With the right amount of training and practice, a civilian would be able to shoot more accurately than LAO. I think her point is, what if we don't want people to shoot better than law enforcement? So do we curtail our training and say now that, hey, you can only go to the range one time a year because we don't want you to get too proficient.
I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't want that to be an outcome. I want to make sure that wasn't an outcome.
But is that something that could potentially happen if we start limiting other things?
That's a slippery slope argument.
It is, right? So I just thought it was an interesting question.
Which is similar to a Nirvana fallacy.
Yeah.
You know, always throw it up and end debate.
Yeah.
So, that's or keep talking like we're doing right now.
Heather says Mike is correct.
Okay, fine. Yeah, it's always Mike. So, I don't want to say we can go on and on. The country does need to go on and on. Like, I get it. Like, this needs to keep being a discussion.
One thing you wanted to talk about, Mike, was what's his name? Rosendahl?
Oh, Rich Rosendahl. So last podcast, and Nick, you weren't here. I did a little bit of a rant about Amber.
I listened.
Yeah,
I was
so
at home with my kid was sick. So.
I found another ridiculous person. They're not hard to find around here, but I saw a video of this guy Rich Rosendahl, I believe his last name is, and he did a entire video on how quote unquote easy it was to get an AR-15. Heck, he could just walk into a gun store and have a background check, and he could have put in. He didn't do it.
No.
But he could have
rounds of ammunition
with 100 rounds of ammunition in 40
school.
Yep, and like right down the street from a school. And it was very
so what keeps him
drama filled, right?
Sure.
And my first question was, but dude, are you a felon?
Yeah.
Like that's the way it's supposed to work.
Well, no, I get it. When people say it's too easy to buy guns, I always say, I want to be open-minded with people that have different views than me. But when they say it's too easy to buy guns, one of the local so-called anti-gun experts here in town that I had to sit and listen to them and go, people are just buying guns and have them sent to their house. That's so not true. So it's like we can't start to have a conversation unless you accept how it really works, which is lots of people buy guns legally. Some of them get them stolen. Lots of guns, not lots of guns. Many guns get sold legally. They get stolen, then they get used in crime. Many guns get bought legally, and then they get traded somewhere, or they sell it privately, legally privately, and then it gets stolen. Do bad guys walk into CVO and try to buy guns? Super duper duper rare, or they're such good bad guys, so to speak, that they passed all the things. Maybe they were Nicholas Cruz. And when people say, when this guy says, I could have done all this, here's my question. Just like I like to ask the media when they go out, they all want to go shoot the guns, right? Literally, when they want to come talk to me, they want to go shoot the rifles. We went out to the range, we shoot the rifle. They smile, they have fun. We shoot at paper because we're sane. And then I ask him, you're holding this in your hand. It has a 45-round magazine in it. You're smiling. Are you thinking about killing kids right now? And they just look repulsed at you. Like, why would you say that? And that's the point. The possession of that thing doesn't make you evil. And I absolutely understand when people say, but it helped me achieve this, this, and this, right? A mechanic can't do their job without their tools. That's what people say. They like to use analogies like that. But I'm not willing, when you say we have to do something, I'm okay with the fact that, like you said, private gun sales. If you want to start running them all through the government, bring it on, whatever. What I'm worried about is it won't get the effects that people think. And I'm not throwing my hands up, and I like that you say that. Well, criminals aren't going to abide by it anyway.
Nirvana fallacy.
Nirvana fallacy. But I do want to do something then by God, empower the Nicks of the world that when they violate those laws and do something, then put them away. Like, truly punish them. Because repeat offender we hear a lot. In this town, Has there been high school kids in this town killed by other high school kids involving firearms?
Yes. Yes, there has.
Illegally possessed firearms or maybe even firearms provided by the family.
Intentional and negligent shootings.
Yeah.
Have
Sure.
occurred.
What was, I turned and
So
remember.
what would you say to Rich though, where he's just appalled by the fact that you can do that?
Rich could have filled his car with explosives too. And when people say, oh, they're not available, they're very easily available if you know where to look and you want to learn about it. If you want to go learn about how to either make your own, achieve your own, steal some. If Rich wanted to wait until all the kids are lined up outside of the school, he could drive over them. Rich could go steal a city snowplow and run over 50 little kids outside one of those schools. Rich could do a lot of things to kill people if that was Rich's motivation. But I'm going to say, the fact that he can take the time to make the video he did, even though when I say I don't understand his point, he's just like me. We both want our kids to be safe, and we don't want to kill people.
Well, we know Rich's point. I mean, I was bringing it up as a little bit of a ridiculous, I'm not going to say argument, just a little drama because...
Why should your rights be hard to use?
Yeah, why should your rights be hard to use? And his point is he doesn't want any firearms at all.
He doesn't.
That was his point.
If Rich wanted to make a point, why didn't he go buy it?
Yeah.
Show it?
Yeah,
Not to
that
say
would have been
that
interesting,
would have
right?
been, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what he was trying to prove, but why didn't he just do it then?
Because my impression of Rich
sitting at home wondering and watching that, like, well, are you? You're telling me you can do it this easily, but can you really?
Well, sure. If you
I think he took the moral high ground on that. Like I could have, but I'm not going to because I'm too moral a person.
That's fine.
Yeah, but
Totally
his
fine.
message that you could do it that easily is true, is it not?
It's true, as in, yes,
have a
a
clean
person,
record and all those type of
if you're an
things.
Iowa resident with a current address on your driver's license and you can pass a FBI background check, then you can come buy a firearm from me and probably less than that firearm. Yeah. And I'm only 10 blocks or I'm 4 blocks from Marion High School. You could do all that in 10 minutes.
But shouldn't it be? I mean, I think it should be that easy.
I do agree.
That freaks some people out, though.
It does.
I accept that. Yep, I see. It freaks Rich out.
No, it freaks a lot of people.
Well, the last person,
Not
like,
just
and this is the thing, is everybody's going to go, they're going to say 17. And before that, it was the huge number in Las Vegas. I get it. And when I say I get it, then they say, no, you don't. You're using very small things that get all the media attention. And my child, those people being killed in there deserve the media attention. They deserve the country to talk about this. But it doesn't make it invalid that I'm worried about things like, hey, the last person like murdered close to me, when I mean close to me physically, like 3 blocks from my store, was a guy that stabbed his girlfriend to death. And you go backwards and say, here's his previous life, as in interaction with law enforcement. Here's the quotes from her family saying, we begged her not to move out to Iowa. Oh, we told her she needed to watch out for this. Her friends started to get distanced, or she distanced herself from her friends that said, this guy's bad for you. And it's like a story, right? It's kind of like a story of a kid that says, I want to go shoot this up, or I want to do that. Is people are going to keep killing people. I don't want to limit people's rights with a time frame. So 3-day waiting period on a handgun, which really means to get a handgun permit in Iowa, pass a background check. And when people say you should believe in,
Don't we already have a waiting period?
Well, your waiting period is to get your permit.
Right.
Yeah, you can't get a pistol permit in,
I mean, they don't hand it to you when you walk up and pay the required fee.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean we throw up our hands and say it never works, Nick. I get it. But it's when people say, it should be more, it should take longer, it should take this. I'm like, well, how do you feel about your, should you have to pass a test or fill out a form to not have Fourth Amendment protection? Should you be able to go out in the street and say what you want and scream from the mountaintops like these kids are today at a school that, by the way, my taxes are helping pay for? So they're out screaming and yelling, being heard, expressing their First Amendment. What if they had to pass a test before they did that? What if we got to see the mental background information about every high school kid at Linn and decide whether they can go speak? How controversial would that be? What do you think the percentage of teenagers are that have already needed psychiatric help at any school in America, let alone Cedar Rapids? And should that infringe their voice to go out and say, this is what I think should go on? And so it doesn't mean we give up, but right. I want to remind people the same passion that they would say, you're not going to tell me my kid can't speak because they've been at St. Luke's or this or that or that. Then also, don't be so quick to say Mike can't have a 30-round magazine. Right? You have to feel the same way as far as what those rights are. Like you said,
have to be
slippery.
Consistent. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how are you consistent from, like I've told many people, here people can bring on the hate again. When people say, would you ever? My own son, by the way, liberal, very liberal, my own son. He said,
life will beat it out of him.
Yes. But if they didn't have these guns, by the way, my own son doesn't want to own an AR. He doesn't think people should be able to own AR-15s. That's Ernie from the gun store son, and that's fine. I raised my kids they live their own life. I also
How much of the younger generation feels that way? I wonder. I've seen mixed statistics.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree. My daughter is not too much older than his. Well, over 5 years older, but not within the same generation, and she surprised the crap out of me today because, once again, I don't push my views on my kids. She's very staunch pro-gun, and I'm not the one that got her that way.
Yeah.
She just made her own mind, just like your son did, right? So I think I think the percentage is probably comparable to the adult, demographic.
Yeah, probably.
Well, the thing about my kid too is he's all about, and this is the thing where he's all about the AR-15. Dad, people don't need those. But literally said, I want to be able to grow up. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I want to be able to carry a pistol to protect myself. I think that's my right. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So pick the gun that's more than 80% of the time used in murders, and that's the one you think everybody should have a right to have. And because statistics go the same way. You and I talked about, we could have people that go, you're right, Ernie. It's less than 1/100% is the AR-15 in America. Go look the numbers up. So let's go over here to these Glocks and Smiths and SIGs and High Points and all these other guns that doesn't matter they are obtained illegally. Let's get rid of those handguns. They could go the other route. When people keep wanting
that's exactly what I was talking about, right? And I'm not calling your son a name, so don't take it that way.
No, that's okay.
Remember at the beginning of the show when I said ignorance?
I call him names.
He's ignorant of that information.
Nobody, worse yet, he knows the information. He has no rational answer to it. I mean, the great kid, awesome debater. And when I brought up the numbers, 2015, they're out. Here's your 292 people killed with 292 people killed with rifles. 2015. That's all people killed with rifles. So you haven't even broken down to what kind of rifle. Oh, by the way, here's the however many thousand with a handgun. You want to do something about this number or a percentage of that number? Over here's this number.
Are you inviting him to take a stance against handguns too? You keep pointing him that direction.
Well, no.
That's kind of where it's going.
It's totally, but it's okay if he would. What I'm saying is, to me, what's weird is he believes in one and not the other. When he says, I don't care if he's against all of them. as long as he can
Maybe
be realistic.
he's talking about, and that's what I do. I advocate for
Sure.
people. I'm an advocate.
That's good.
Maybe he's talking about we need to do something about mass shootings.
There you go, and that's what it comes back
people
to.
are more capable of executing a mass shooting
Mm-hmm.
with a high capacity magazine attached to an AR-15 than they are with a handgun. So
Would you
just trying
agree?
to address the situation specifically.
So can I deny the fact that you can shoot more bullets with more ammunition source? No, I can't deny that.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he's trying to do is
Sure.
like, well, let's tackle one problem at a time. We got to stop mass shootings. We
And
got to
you-
figure out a way to do this. It's a holistic solution.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is the younger generation asking and begging the older generation to explain to us why do we need an AR-15? And you know what's not going to work? It's all right.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Well,
It's not going to work with young people. They hear all the time because I said so.
yeah.
All the time. And did anybody ever accept that when they were a teenager? When their parents said because I said so? No.
And-
so
and
let's,
tho-
let's
Well,
explain.
let's
to
go
them.
back to that. I came
know?
from a time frame that you did what your parents said, and if you asked,
this debate, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
You know what I mean.
Agreed.
Parents are
However, I
enablers.
have already seen
That's
one
true. That's
comment,
true.
and I'll let people read the comments
But it's-
themselves, and I didn't call them out, but I've already
What?
seen one comment on our little comment thread there that said, kids aren't old enough to vote. They don't have any rights. That is not true.
no,
That is not true.
that's not true. Well, factually, by the way, they don't have a right to vote.
Life, liberty,
if
and the
they're not-
pursuit of happiness
No, no.
starts at life.
What? Read it word for word. You can't vote until you're 18. So
Yeah, right.
true. So if they're saying they don't have any, do they have the ability to influence things? They already are. They already do. We have both good and bad things going on.
Right there.
Yeah.
What?
That's
Okay.
that's not true.
No, that's not true. If that was true, that person would have to factually understand. If that was true, you would have no right to defend their life using your gun as someone beat them to death with a baseball bat at the age of 10 because they don't have the right. Right? They don't.
Exactly
they have
my
no
point.
rights.
Rights
So-
start the minute you're a person.
And a whole nother conversation is having teenagers who are almost ready to go out in the real world, not the way they used to it. When I was 18 or you were 18. It's a different world now.
I mean, we can get into that whole philosophical debate on 18. I mean, back in the Middle Ages, you were the man at like 14. Like
Yeah.
as soon as you could pick up your sword and start
then
stabbing people,
people
you were
will-
the man, right?
people will
So it's
say-
a cultural thing.
People will say
you could
we've
also marry
evolved.
11-year-olds back
Right,
then,
you
right?
could.
So-
Well, because
as it progressed.
because if you want to get farther, life expectancy was like 32 years old. So
You're middle aged.
yes,
What
well,
about
I'm
that-
dead at this point.
What about that debate though? Because I mean, didn't the president even kind of throw out a feeler on raising the age to purchase?
Yeah, I don't agree
yeah.
with that. I don't
you
agree
know,
with that.
I mean,
No.
I don't agree with it either, and people won't like that. But it'll especially be interesting if he says that we're going to raise the age of certain type of rifles only.
yeah.
Because a Ruger 1022 is what the guy went and bought, read the directions, and went into the mall in Washington. one
Was it
where
the
he's-
Washington? I know the
Oh.
one incident in Washington where a guy went into a house with a 1022.
This is the guy that went and you see him running around through the racks of clothing.
So
inside
multiple instances.
And when
so.
people say, okay, then it's always guns. My point is there's a lot of gun owners out there that are maybe not like me. And what I mean is they're like, oh, I'm okay with getting rid of those kind of guns, but I want my guns because I hunt, right? That's the other thing I keep hearing about is hunting, having something to do with the Second Amendment. But the Ruger 1022 is definitely like in the top 3 distributed semi-automatic little 22 rifles. Like everybody's like, oh, that's super famous. I have one of those. That's cool. People have used them to go have mass casualty shootings. So,
Right, but to Nick's point though, and he's just bringing, is it
No.
okay to change the? I have a problem with changing the age to 21 because I'm a single issue voter on this subject. We're asking people in the military
yeah,
to go defend their country and put their lives on the line and take that oath I talked about earlier
sure,
at 18 or with a waiver you can do it at 17,
sure.
but they can't own a firearm to protect themselves. I don't agree with that.
I understand.
Are these the same kids that are too ignorant to have an opinion on this issue too? I mean, that's
I
kinda
don't
where we
agree.
started
I,
as well.
yeah, I don't
you
agree.
know?
I don't
mean,
agree that they are too ignorant to have an opinion. They may.
There's 18-year-olds that march out of high schools, and
Yeah.
So-
the kids don't understand enough about the world.
Yeah.
But
So
they can
should
get a
we
gun.
raise the age of when a kid can join the military?
No, I
is
don't
that
think so
another
because you won't
discussion?
have enough cannon fodder there. Because the
Spoken from a
you-
military guy.
hey man,
you know
it's
what?
the truth.
Mhm.
It's a young man's game, right? I didn't stay or I didn't quit because I didn't like it. It's the best job I ever had. I was getting too old.
Mm-hmm.
That's reality. you got to have prime young folks. And I was kind of joking when I said cannon fodder, but it's the truth. You got to have the youth that are in prime physical condition at their peak physical abilities in the military. I mean, it's just the way it is.
I mean,
Sure.
you know, when you say that, I'm sorry, I'm chiming in on you guys.
I want you to chime in.
But when you're
Were you in the
saying-
military?
Yeah, but when
I
you're
think you
saying
can
this
have
is
it.
the reality, there's a percentage that companies kind of use is like the percentage of fail rate, right?
Mhm.
Out of all of our products that we produce, how many of those products are going to fail? What's the percentage? And that's an acceptable failure, right? We apply that because of what? Because materials are not all the same, because the human component is involved in that. And are we making this situation of gun violence hyperbolic because we're not looking at the numbers truly? How many people are in the United States? How many people are in the world? And how much are we? What is the percentage of people in a school shooting that happen every year? You know, is it less than 1%? Is that an acceptable fail rate? It sounds harsh. It sounds horrible. It also sounds horrible that you say a young person can go into the military because we need cannon fodder, because that is a reality. So is this a reality? We're able to now see all these stories around the United States at a blink of an eye. Can we even accept this type of a thing as a human being? Are we biologically able to accept constant negative footage, or is this, you know what, percentage-wise, numbers-wise, statistics, mass shootings are way down in how people are being killed, whereas maybe we should care more about vehicles. Maybe we should care more about the red Chevy truck. You know, maybe we should care more about smoking and things like that.
That goes back to the whole risk versus benefit thing. And I think it's being influenced by, you said, you know, and whether we agree or disagree with that statement that mass shootings are going down, right? Let's just say it's true. I believe it's being reported more, which puts it more in people's faces. And so now the risk versus benefit, people are starting to really disagree on where that line is.
And I'm always going to go back to the fact that you don't care how rare something is when you're the one living through it. So,
Oh, absolutely.
so when I say I get it, is there is no more important thing to a lot of people in this country, especially anyone part or related to those 17 families in Florida. So I get it. It's the same thing I say in class every other Wednesday night, which is you don't care how rare it is of any type of certain violence. Oh, well, you're a Caucasian person that makes 120 grand a year and live in this neighborhood and this, and this, so it's rare you would ever be attacked. All that shit doesn't matter when somebody kicks in your front door, right? Or is standing in front of you with a machete and a handgun.
Right.
Which happens, you know, like at 3:30 in the afternoon in Cedar Rapids, Iowa sometimes. So it doesn't matter how rare it is. I understand it being the driving force for those families.
Well,
I will always respect that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the preventability of some deaths that really raise people's engagement in discussions. And, you know, the concept of a life being taken by another person intentionally is a little less palatable to the public in general as just accepting it as a fact of reality than a life taken by the repetitive decision to make poor life choices like smoking or the random act of a vehicle crash.
Yeah.
You know, so as human beings, do we just say, well, fatalistically, life happens, people are going to die, or do we say, this, you know, this looks preventable?
Yeah.
Maybe we should do something about this.
Sure.
Maybe we should figure out a way to stop people from intentionally hurting others. Are there solutions to that? Because we're not all going to sit around and say, well, shit, you know, life happens. People are bad.
You know,
Move
you go watch. So I watched, and I do all kinds of.
Great point. Thank you.
Yeah. Go watch the show Kid Killers on Netflix, and go watch any of the documentaries about previous school shooters. And some people would say, oh, my God, I can't believe you watch all the. You have to try to understand, right? But go backwards and look at the things like, hey, Billy started out by beating his dog to death with a baseball bat. And they knew that. And the other kid beat his dog to death and lit it on fire. And by the way, go back and look at all kinds of famous killers and how they started. You know, hey, I'm going to start small. I'm going to kill my guinea pig. I'm going to kill this. I'm going to kill that. So there's signs, right? You know, maybe only one out of 20 people that would kill their own family pet go on to be a mass shooter. But is it enough? Is that enough to start saying, oh, well, you know, 1 out of 1 million gun owners buy something legally and go commit a mass shooting? 1 out of 1 million. So we're going to focus on that. And if you say yes, then I want you to also focus on the 1 out of 20 kids in Linn County that have known. They're not known to everybody because it's their juvenile record that we don't ever get to see, that they beat a dog to death or hung their own family pet in the backyard or killed their neighbor's pet. And those are the kind of things when you say holistic view on this, it's got to all come out. If you got a crazy psycho acting neighbor, call them out on it.
And what can we do to assist those folks in law enforcement to be able to actually prevent something from happening? Because
Sure.
if you can report Billy has been torturing animals since the age of 8,
Yeah.
and he's got some really disturbing posts on social media, but there's not a damn thing you can do about it
Sure.
because there's nothing in the law that allows you to do it, then that's where some of these discussions need to begin. You know, I mean, one of the issues that's been thrown out too is I'm going to get this wrong as far as the term goes, but the concept is the restraining order on guns. You know, if you can make a case for a loved one or somebody in
To
the
have a
community
temporary restraining order.
to take their firearms away. And that, you know what, Mike, that could happen to someone who's not doing anything wrong too.
No, you're right.
That's your point. I think is you're going to say, well, what about freedoms? You know, they take it away from me. I didn't do anything wrong. You know, what kind of inconvenience are you personally willing to deal with in order to potentially prevent preventable deaths? That'll be the conversation I think that people will need to have. You know, yes, your rights are going to be inconvenienced, but what's the greater cause here? What's the greater result you're trying to get at?
And, you know, it's almost like a metaphor that guns are something that can be used for good and bad. So are those no contact orders and those short, you know, so I get it. Some people are going to.
In the law, there could have been a way to get in and get Nicholas Cruz's guns away. Well, potentially that may have been preventable.
We'll know more and more here, won't we? I mean,
it's not all out. You're right.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. This is my Ernie brain. It'll be interesting how much focus and how much the government and the federal government and every super smart dude that works for the government in some basement starts going backwards and going through all the information from that. And then people will say, we still don't know jack shit about the Las Vegas shooter thing. I was
just thinking, I'm like, what about the conspiracy tinfoil hat people that are like, what about Las Vegas?
What about like almost the largest kill? You know, if you want to start
bump stocks, ban bump stocks,
right?
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna
do something.
Right.
MAGA.
No,
President Trump's gonna fix everything.
Yeah,
because he's the king.
Yes. Some people are going to believe that you believe that. How many messages?
They can believe that I can believe it, but they know me. They know it's not true.
We had 44 comments. Thanks everybody for watching the live.
It's like
Facebook
you're kicking
live
us
show.
off. Are you
No,
kicking me
I'm just
off?
saying. I just wanted to say thanks.
Can they hear you?
He's
to
kicking
everybody
you
who's
off.
Can they even hear you saying thank you?
They can.
That's
They
awesome.
Can, yeah.
I love it.
He's trying to do our job for us.
No,
man.
we need help. That's
Thanks
for sure.
watching.
Thanks
That's
for
what he's trying to say.
Okay, thank you for we had like a whole 35 people live. That's like a record.
We had it to 41 earlier.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
do you want to try to cover 8 more things in like 20 more minutes?
no, I think we got time for one more thing.
One more thing?
Yeah. What else?
How
do you wanna
about some
talk
important
Mike?
things? Mike? Anyone? We don't have enough time to go through the whole the Red Oak case out there, but yeah, we could have a whole show on stand your ground and what people think it means and doesn't mean and what's going on. You and I talked about is stand your ground. So does it mean like and I'm not trying to throw the guy under the bus, but this case over there is 2 guys show up in an alley. One of them yells at you, runs at you, knocks you down, whatever, and then you shoot them in self-defense. And when everybody thinks that sounds, acceptable, what do we know about why they met in the alley? I understand people's frustration. I mean, I truly understand other people's frustration saying, so stand your ground has been decided. This guy doesn't have to go to court. So what kind of things won't be admissible? What kind of phone records won't be admissible that he had just texted them and said, meet me here? If I tell you to meet me here, and people can say, dude, we meet people at Craigslist and buy things all the time, whatever. So I get it. I'm just saying, is there more to that? It's very curious to me. Very curious. If I tell you to show up and I'm there with a gun, which I carry a gun everywhere, right? That I legally can. But I mean, some people could say that's going armed with intent to say, meet me here to do this or this. And I don't know, are they selling car parts or are they selling then less than 5 grams of marijuana or whatever?
There's a lot of moving parts that go into a situation like that.
Sure.
And when we talk about the way the system is designed, there's a lot of points in the system at which different questions are answered. So when we look at the situation in Red Oak, I guess one question I have here is, if this was such a clear-cut case of self-defense, which based on the facts we're being told, it is.
Yeah.
Why was this person even charged?
Sure.
To begin with.
Right.
You know, and I've read the article, and the Montgomery County attorney said, "Oh, we're just a small county," or whoever the assistant was, we didn't know the law. I'm not necessarily accepting that. If that's the case, then that's the case. But why was there even a charge in that case? And if there's more to the story, isn't that also what we have trials for? I mean, what if this wasn't a justified shooting? What if there was more to the story? What if somebody was doing something wrong when this happened? Is that not for the, if the prosecutor believes there's enough evidence to go forward to charge this, is that not for a trier of fact to figure out? And was this decision on immunity that took place here that was made by the judge, was it based on only part of the story?
Yeah.
The story of the shooter in that case.
And it can go either way.
People came running and screaming at him in the alley.
I don't know.
It's not usually how somebody approaches someone to mug them is just,
what I thought was so interesting, and
weird.
And maybe we read the same article, but I read a article. What I thought was very interesting was that this law has been tested so infrequently, and I'm going to say in a legitimate way, right?
Yeah.
There's been a few times people have tried to use it as a defense, and we're like, no.
Well, still to this
But
day.
anyway, it's been used so infrequently in a legitimate way that the judge had to go outside the state of Iowa to find some precedent. And like I read that he went to Florida to kind of get some frame of reference for what is justifiable and what's not. I just thought that was really interesting.
So what drives me nuts too is whether you're for it or against it, be educated about it. And you still have the media saying that the Lamar Wilson case was a stand your ground case. Even in one of the last things posted, it was he used the stand your ground defense. No, he proposed that it should be stand your ground, because the whole idea is, like we're seeing in Red Oak, if the judge says, yes, this applies, then you don't have a trial. You wouldn't be at a trial.
Right.
You might be at a trial for, hey, by the way, you ran over a stop sign when you left that scene or whatever. But as Nick would point out too, is like, hey, if you're going to use stand your ground, there's certain things the law says you have to do within a reasonable time frame. And now people can say, what's reasonable? Hey, I was in a shooting, and I got to make sure I'm safe first. Like right now, right? First, I'm going to back away, make sure I'm safe, maybe get to a position of advantage or something, get on the phone with the police and say, oh, my God, I need help, right? And maybe I need, like, an ambulance. When those police show up, it's sooner or later, when I do mean sooner or later after everybody's safe and they make the scene safe, is it not required by law to turn your firearm over to law enforcement?
That's certainly what it says in the statute.
It's what it says in the actual words of the statute.
What happens if you don't do that is still a question of debate. Does stand your ground not apply? Does it still apply? Is that a requirement?
I mean, because this guy's case was like, wasn't it like a judge on a Friday said, a Friday or a Monday or something that said, hey, this is stand your ground, you're not going to trial. And the dude was supposed to go the next Tuesday, like days away.
So. Yeah.
It was only like a day or two away.
And which is the complete opposite of what's being considered in the Wilson case.
Sure.
Where, the trial's already done.
Yeah.
The judge decides. But, why that's happening is there's no guidance from the legislature on how what the procedure is to determine stand your ground immunity.
And just for those of us that are ignorant of how that process works, what I'm going to say I don't want you to put you on the spot and have you give your opinion, but what's the path to give that guidance? What's been done in the past?
Well, I guess the way I look at it is the legislature needs to revisit it and clarify it. The stand your ground can present immunity from prosecution if these procedures are followed. A, you remain on the scene and turn over your firearm to law enforcement for analysis, for those type of things. B, the other requirements of the stand your ground statute are met, that you were acting in self-defense. It was reasonable. You weren't required to flee, but this is something that, based on the circumstances, you felt that your life was in danger. And I think there would probably have to be something that would say that the facts have to be undisputed. I get that. That's where I'm confused at, and where I want some guidance at is like, were these facts that were presented in Red Oak, were they undisputed?
Yeah.
Because that third person who got away, did they testify? You know, I mean,
Yeah,
it
one guy
didn't
got
seem
shot, one
like
guy
it.
did. Yeah,
So,
we don't know.
and that's where I go back to, like, well, that's how trials sort these things out. So I guess what my suggestion would be, well, if the legislature intends there to be an actual immunity from prosecution aspect to stand your ground, they need to lay out the procedure for it, how it works, what the standard is, what the judge needs to find by. Is it preponderance? Is it clear and convincing? Does there have to be undisputed facts like there would be in a motion for summary judgment filed in civil court where you say, even if all this is true, I'm still not liable?
Yeah.
That's how civil cases are handled, where, you know, when you hear the judge threw it out in civil court, that's a situation where the person being sued says, I agree with everything that's being said by the plaintiff. I'm still not liable for it. So is that what should be included in stand your ground? I mean, is that what the legislature intends? That we'll give you all the benefit of all the facts that are even against you, you're still immune from prosecution. It's not clear, so judges are just guessing right now. I mean, educated guess.
Right.
You know, based on whatever law they can find.
And sometimes we do or don't agree with judges.
Correct. Yeah.
I wrote a story about that, but we don't have time for that today. You know what? I didn't even say disagree. I had a story to educate people about that. Hey, guess what? You know, what have judges done, and how much have you researched it, and how much do you know before you go to the voting booth and decide whether to retain them or not? And that really pissed off a bunch of people.
That did. They're like, how dare you
Yeah.
advocate for, like, I'm not, like, it's okay. I'll just go back to the baseline reality that this is the United States of America, and people can do what they want with their mouths.
Yes.
If they accept the consequences.
Some of those, you know, and I'm not making light of it, some of those same people are over here, you know, just like we were talking about, these kids have rights before they turn 18, and then when they turn 18, they have the right to vote. And so I was one of those people, too. I got the right to vote.
But they got to be 21 to get a lottery ticket and get alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they can buy
they get a
smokes
gun.
and pay tax at 18.
Right.
So
You,
there's money to be made
you
off
know,
that.
I'm just going to throw a little libertarian logic at you. Isn't
Sure.
that funny?
Funny.
How we give them a right to vote at 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then to tax them,
Mm-hmm.
they have to be older.
No, you can tax them at 18 when they buy smokes.
True. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
thinking more of the lottery, though.
Gas tax, road tax.
Yeah.
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 School tax. Yeah.
So I guess this is the question I kind of had earlier
Okay.
when we were talking about it.
I knew you were thinking because he was taking notes. I like it.
I got to.
Yep.
I'm not as sharp as I
I don't want to make
might
you
be
late.
giving off to everybody right
Remind him it's 10:34. We
Probably
can't
not.
make Nick late.
now.
Fire away.
Yeah, isn't there some kind of inherent contradiction here when we talk about the age limit, and should the age be raised from 18 to 21 for certain firearms or accessories, whether it be high-capacity magazines or whatever it may be, when we say, oh, no, they should be able to purchase at 18, but we don't even trust 18-year-olds with a lottery ticket?
Yeah. Or you can.
I
if-
mean, yeah, that's
maybe the
kind. That's
argument is
kind
we
of.
move it down for lottery tickets.
I think.
then.
I
don't
think
know.
we're agreeing. I mean, that was my point earlier. I don't think that 21 should be the age limit. I think 18.
Okay.
If we're going to set an age
That's-
limit, I think 18 is reasonable for
And-
everything.
And also to play devil's advocate, yeah, I mean, it's you sit here because I've raised two kids. One's about to be in that bracket, and the other one's just exiting. You know, is 22. Is you say, okay, tell me again what rights you demand to have and that you want, and you want me to listen, but you're basically also saying, don't trust me as like a fully capable adult until you're 21. Okay, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Where
Is it like a learner's permit?
yeah, well, you know what?
Like we're going to
people-
give you a learner's permit on your rights. Like from 18 to 21, you can have these rights.
And I know that they get tired of things like saying, like you said, because I said so, right? I agree with you, as in you don't blindly just follow people because they said. If my parents would have said walk off the cliff, I would have disagreed, and they would have whipped me anyway. But anyway, that's my generation whip. But the thing is like, how do they want it? They want to be taken serious. And when I say serious, is these kids have every right to be upset. I also want them to focus on how it all real works, like how bad the problem really is, how deep it is, and how many directions it goes, like all the different things we just talked about. What I don't want, if they accomplished somehow tomorrow, here's what I'm worried about. If they accomplish tomorrow that you have some type of godlike power to suck up every AR-15 into the sky, are you going to go skipping and dancing through life tomorrow thinking nobody's going to ever be able to kill you? Because then you're lying to yourself, and anybody that tells you, when people keep saying, how are we going to make our schools safer? I get the concept they're talking about. But you even have the girl on TV, very famous at this point, saying, we're going to make this the last mass shooting ever. I agree with her passion. I understand her direction. What I don't want anybody to ever think is that ends all violence, because it doesn't.
Right.
And I don't want them to be, and that's where they want to be treated like an adult, and I mean that lovingly. And believe me, I respect that, because I started telling my kids a long time ago about all the bad things in the world. If you're not talking to your first grader about pedophiles and how your janitor might want to have sex with you, and so you got to be open with your kid to talk to me about that. And when people think, literally, my friends, when they think that's weird, it's not weird. If you want to wait till your kid's 13 to start talking about pedophiles, you miss the really big window there. So, but that's just how I approached even like their physical okayness when it comes to, if you want to say stranger danger, this and that. I was super blunt with them. So I don't want them to think because of, just like my son, remember his view? Just because all AR-15s are gone tomorrow, I don't want you to think it doesn't mean someone won't kill you. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that somebody might not roll up outside of Walgreens and you get shot in a gang fight.
When do you talk to kids about school shootings, that they might be in school someday and somebody might come in and...
When do I start teaching them?
Yeah.
Oh, like it was 2nd or 3rd grade when I started telling them don't listen to the teacher. And that's where people get mad, right? And I come from a family of teachers. But when the rules were get underneath your desk and don't go anywhere, that's where, like I said, factually, my kids went to Arthur. I'm like, hey, you spend half your day on the first floor, throw the chair through the window, jump out and run. Mm-hmm. Hey, Arthur's so old it has old-fashioned toilets in each room that has a ceramic lid. Mm-hmm. On it. You know what? Yeah. Hey, if they're going to force you to the back of the room, I want you to go steal the ceramic lid and put it over and you just hang on to it. Hold it over your chest. Mm-hmm. And when people are like, you're crazy, literally, I'm like, am I? Am I crazy to teach my kid that these kind of things could help you survive, especially escaping, right? Number one thing. You treat that mass shooter like a ginormous walking ball of fire with electricity shooting out of it. The idea is get as far away from that as you can. Get out of there.
So when the kids get old enough and they've been taught all of this and
Mm-hmm.
they've been let them know that the world's bad and that they might need to grab a ceramic toilet seat to protect themselves in school, when they get old enough and they say, well, Dad, what are we doing to make sure I don't have to do this anymore? What do we say?
Yeah, that's where this conversation's going, right? What do I say?
We got to be prepared to answer both questions, I think.
You're right. But remember when I said I'm simple, Mike and I do that every day right now. Mike and I teach classes do that. Mm-hmm. We teach classes that are proven to save lives, as in if you do these things, right? True or not? We're teaching people.
I don't have personal experience.
No, I'm saying.
But yes, the techniques have been shown to save lives.
Sure. What I'm saying is, and like I told you in the beginning, I'm just going to start here because I'm a simple-minded, factual guy. That hey, we can teach them to start surviving. We got to teach them how to stop the violence once it finds them. I don't want it to find them either, and I'm going to count on everybody else, and I would like to be involved. But when I say everybody's smarter than me, I'm simple-minded enough to say, if a person shows up with a suicide vest, how do you stop them? It's not words, it's not laws, it's not this or that. It's how are you going to stop them? Who's going to be the kid to run and tackle him to save the other 60 kids? Don't know. Tough decision, right? Or what football coach will it be? What 65-year-old bus driver will it be who I would say hammered you way harder than the athletic coach at that one school?
Yeah, that
bus driver.
He was on game.
He was on game. But I get it. I'm not giving up, Nick. It's just that I have to start and say this over here saves lives, proven, like that we see, whether it's films, videos, police reports, and then we got to go backwards. I told that to the think tank 5 years ago in this town is, I'll meet you in the middle. That think tank that has a whole bunch of people on it that you know and respect, doctors and lawyers and other people said, hey, if these kids can't read by the time they're in 3rd grade, if they can't read at the proper level, what's their chances of going forth in life and being super successful, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had the people that say they need better parenting and this and this and this. When I say good luck with that, I want it to happen. I just know that culturally and as a human thing and privacy thing, who's going to get into those houses and start making those changes? I'll try to help people down here on this end survive violence once it happens.
Sure.
It's not giving up, but it's I'm doing something. Right? How many more shows do we need to cover our 7 other subjects?
Well,
he's got to be to court.
Yeah, he's got to go.
He's got to go.
All right, good show.
Well, yeah. Sorry to keep you the last minute. You're gonna have to bolt.
Oh, that's okay.
Want us to get you a police
There's
escort?
2 parties in court.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I'm good.
So we're just gonna have to jump off. All right.
Yeah.
So come back in a couple months.
I enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks for coming. Really enjoyed it myself.
And I like your view. When I say your view,
We
it's
need to
not
continue to talk, and
We do.
You never can be fully sure that you're absolutely right about everything unless you hear out all sides of it.
Yes.
And that's really what I try to do, and it gets me in trouble sometimes. But I just ask questions.
I think we should have a
that's what
contest.
people do. You got
We
to
should
keep
have
asking questions. Are we doing enough? Something's got to be done. Isn't that
Yeah.
why we started the show?
Yes.
Yep.
What's next?
Are we doing enough?
We should have a contest on who can articulate and write the best email to Nick on why should a private citizen be able to own a 30-year-old magazine. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's a bunch of them that if you're going to rant and rave and say this and this and this, but I'd like to hear the articulate answers. I mean, I know what mine
It doesn't even have to
is.
be to me. Pretend you're explaining that to a kid who just went through a drill at Arthur School,
Sure.
and has been told by his father, rightfully so, to grab a ceramic toilet seat to protect yourself.
Sure.
And that kid asks you that. Explain that to them.
Yeah.
I think that, and that's kind of brings us back full circle too to the kids walking out of school. And
I feel a
demonstrating.
blog post coming on.
Oh,
Anyway,
do you?
Yeah.
That's
Looking
all right.
forward to it.
Well, again, should I say goodbye to everybody, Shane? Can they hear you? All right.
Yes, they
Yes,
can.
they can
They
hear
can
me.
hear
That's
me now.
awesome.
Yes.
So sorry we had to just jump off, but Nick's got to go. Thank you for all listening live. You can go back, still ask questions. We can get back to them. We can get them in order. We'll get you some kind of answer. We got to get Nick back on here again in a couple months. Next person's going to be, I don't know, we're going to have Jason Clark back. Or
In April. Jason's
Yes.
probably going to be on April. So
next month is an officer. I have an officer here coming next
Jason
month.
asked me just to mention that he does have a grappling with weapons class coming up in March, and he just wanted me to mention that. He asked me to
At
do
the
this.
Iowa City.
Yep, that is Iowa City Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So
Okay.
look at their Facebook page.
Nick, thanks for your time.
You bet.
Very much. Sorry to keep you so late. Mike, thanks for your help. Shane, thanks for your help. And so we can get out of here, right?
Yeah.
As always, watch out for the red Chevy truck. Thanks
Peace
for
out.
joining us.